Evening, everyone. We'll get the whole meeting started. Welcome to everyone in the council chambers and council members at 4:59 p.m. Land acknowledgement statement. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge with respect the history, spirituality, and culture of the Shinnebec, the people of Three Fires, known as Ojibwe, Odawa, and the Potawatomi Nation, who have inhabited this lands from time immemorial, and further give thanks to the Chippewas, the Saugeen, and the Chippewas of Nawash, now known as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, as the traditional keepers of this land. We also recognize the Métis and Inuit whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. May we all, as treaty people, live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship with all its diverse peoples. Approval of the agenda. Recommendation is the agenda be approved as presented. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Thompson. Councillor Coburn. Discussion. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? And that is carried. Declaration of pecuniary interest. Does anyone have any declaration of pecuniary interest? If seen at any time, you can declare at any time. Announcements. Does any member wish to make an announcement? Oh, Mayor Carlton.
I think we should again recognize that prior to council today, we had our Senior of the Year award from the province for Danuta Valu, who had also been our Volunteer of the Year award winner. So just congratulations again to Danuta, and thanks to everyone that was here for that.
Thank you for that. All right, no further. All right, carrying on. Public hearings. Recommendation reads that the regular meeting of the Committee of the Whole be recessed to hold a public hearing for zoning bylaw application Z0923 Forbes Quarry expansion. We need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Winters, Councillor Thompson. Discussion. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? That is carried. All right, 6.1 Z0923 Forbes Quarry expansion. This meeting has been called to consider zoning bylaw amendment application Z0923 for property legally described as Lot 7, 8, 9, and part of Lot 10. In session 18, Township of Georgian Bluffs. Madam Clerk, please advise the method by which notice of this public meeting was given.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Notice of this public meeting was given by ordinary mail to all property owners within 120 meters, 400 feet of the subject property, to all relevant agencies on May 17, 2024, and posted on the County of Grey's website. 2 development notices were posted on site identifying the nature of the proposal and public meeting details. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Township of Georgian Bluffs before the proposed zoning bylaw is adopted or passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Township of Georgian Bluffs to the local planning appeal tribunal unless the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the local planning appeal tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to add the person or public body as a party.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The planner, please proceed with the review of the application.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Tonight we have Specky Hillier and Michael Cook from County of Grey. They're both planner and ecologist with the county. And Ms. Hillier will be doing a brief presentation on the quarry expansion because it involves both a county official plan amendment as well as a local zoning bylaw.
Thank you for that. Yes, Becky, if you'd like to come to the podium here, thank you.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Thanks for the welcome here this evening. Just before we start, I just wanted to confirm, so the public meeting that we're having today is just to discuss both the zoning bylaw amendment as well as the county official plan amendment. And we're just trying to combine both of those here tonight just for kind of general efficiency purposes. So I'm just going to be speaking a little bit to the county official plan amendment portion, which is known as OPA 19 for the Forbes Quarry expansion, which we are processing concurrently, working with the township as they process the zoning portion of that, but they're happening at the same time. So just to provide a little bit of background about the proposal, so the county official plan amendment was submitted by Don and Toby Fort Tony Forbes, through Coesta Planning Consultants, who are acting as the applicants in this application. The application proposes to alter land use permissions on the property to expand the existing quarry operation on the subject land. So there's already a quarry operating on this site. The OPA would expand what we call the mineral resource extraction area designation from about 12.5 hectares currently to 87.85 hectares. And approximately 56-ish hectares would be for extraction purposes. So there's kind of the licensed area, and then there's the extraction area within that. And as I mentioned, a related zoning bylaw amendment application has also been submitted to the Township of Georgian Bluffs. That's the Z09-23. And this meeting, of course, serves as that joint public meeting for both the county OPA and the Township zoning bylaw amendment. And as the clerk mentioned, notice has been provided to all neighbors and agencies under the Planning Act. Importantly to note, this process is also moving concurrently with a similar type of process under the Aggregate Resource Act, which is a process that is mandated by the province and also involves a public circulation element. And so I understand that that process has kind of already happened and is still ongoing, but it's moving concurrently with the planning process as well. So the location of the subject lands, just so we all have our bearings here. So I don't have control of the mouse on my screen, but we've got a northern road there on the right of that yellow box. That is Zion Church Road. And then to the south frontage of that property, we have concession 17. So it's actually 3 properties in one. And as you can see, that kind of quarry area to the south there is the existing quarry. And then it would expand beyond that across the site. Change the page. So the lands are legally described as lot 7, 8, and 9, and part of lot 10 on concession 18 in the geographic township of Keppel, now in Georgian Bluffs. The subject lands are 170 hectares in size approximately, and they currently consist of 3 separate properties. The eastern property contains a single residential house, a barn, accessory structures, some natural heritage features, and a farming operation. It's my understanding that the applicants intend to retain that single house and barn and accessory structures. And so the license area would go around those structures. The southern property is very small. It contains a single residential house, which is proposed to be removed, and extraction would occur below where that house currently exists. And then the western property currently contains that existing quarry operation. It appears to be partially used for agricultural purposes. In addition, it has a large forested area. Surrounding land uses around the property include a county-owned forest to the south, which, it's county-owned, and there's also an active quarry operation to the southwest, which is a smaller scale quarry. There's various natural areas and features around. There's rural, residential, and agricultural lands. And Mountain Lake is located about 1.5 kilometers to the east of the site. So in terms of the proposed amendment, so the subject lands has kind of got that dotted purple outline, and then the purple lines show the proposed expansion of the quarry areas, and then the red slatted lines show where the existing quarry is. So as we can see, the entire site is not proposed to be licensed for the quarry. It's probably about 2/3 of the site or so. And then towards the top right there, that's where the existing house and barn is on the eastern portion of the property. So just some details of the proposal. So under the provincial licensing process through the Aggregate Resources Act, the applicants are proposing to maintain their current annual maximum tonnage, which is 100,000 tons. So that means that the amount of material that's taken from the site each year is not really proposed to change through this application. The land area is proposed to kind of gradually increase as they work their way through it, but the intensity of the use isn't proposed to really be altered. The extraction is proposed below the water table, so that means when they start digging for the aggregate material, they're going to eventually hit the water and then go below that, and that requires some pumping of that water in order to do that. No blasting is proposed through the expanded quarry area. Typically, we do see blasting within quarries just to, it's usually, once or twice a month or something like that. But in this case, the applicants are not looking for that. It's anticipated that about 21 hectares of forested area, that was sort of our best guess based on the mapping that we have, would need to be removed over the lifespan of the quarry operation. And that's not to say that that would all be kind of removed all at once, but sort of over the years, that would be something that the applicants would be needing to do in order to get the extraction area that they want. The extraction is proposed in phases, with each stage progressively rehabilitated. So that means that the whole site is not going to be a quarry all at once. It will mean they'll start extracting in one area, and once the materials remove that area will be rehabilitated before they move on to the next phase. The zoning amendment is proposing to use the existing quarry area to process material on site, while also acknowledging the existing office and accessory use structures that are on the site as part of the current quarry operation. And the site is proposed to be rehabilitated as various water features, which would include small lakes and wetlands. And so sometimes when we have these below the water table quarry operations, because they're digging quite deep down into the bedrock, and they're finding that the water table, it can be difficult to rehabilitate these types of uses to a forest or farmland because of that material has really been removed from the site. And so what the applicants are proposing is that a large portion of the site would contain these water features, some of which would be quite deep, I think in sort of the range of 12 to 14 meters, and others would be shallower and would be more of a kind of wetland or pond-like feature. So as I noted, both the county official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment are required, and they're being processed concurrently. And just for everyone's reference, the county's official plan requires an official plan amendment for all new or expanded quarry operations. So that's a little bit slightly different than gravel pit operations, where they're not necessarily required, but for quarries, we do require it for every new quarry. And so just so everyone knows how we consider our decisions on planning matters, there's a few high-level provincial documents that we consider, as well as the county's official plan. One of those is the provincial policy statement. And so the provincial policy statement provides some high-level guidance of why we make decisions the way we do and what we need to consider. And so one of the elements of the provincial policy statement is that it provides direction to protect mineral resources for future extraction operations. So it's kind of an acknowledgement that, we have this rock or we have this gravel resource, and it only exists in limited areas. It's not everywhere. And Georgian Bluffs is very blessed with the amount of bedrock that they seem to have. But that's not the case sort of across the board, across the province or across Canada. And so we're directed to protect those resources where they are from other types of land uses that would kind of infringe on being able to use those resources, which we do need for, building and roads and all of those things. But at the same time, the PPS also directs us to acknowledge that we have natural heritage features to protect. We need to consider the implications for our woodlands, our forests, our wetlands, and habitat for different types of plants and animals, and particularly those that are at risk of losing different types of habitats that they rely on. And of course, our groundwater supplies. We need to make sure that if this proposal does move forward, it's not going to have impacts on our freshwater supplies and for the properties and areas that rely on that resource. The county's official plan has quite similar policy language to the provincial policy statement. In this case, the land is designated as rural. So within our kind of countryside, we have prime agricultural land, and then we have our rural lands. And so this property has not been identified as prime agricultural, it's rural. It certainly still has very important value, but it's not kind of considered a prime agricultural resource in terms of a kind of food production perspective. It's also been identified partially as hazard lands, and then of course the mineral resource extraction to identify that existing quarry. Importantly, there are some large natural heritage features on the property. A large portion of the site is covered in what we call our county core area. So those are large areas of significant ecological value that exist throughout the county, and they're kind of the largest, most contiguous areas of forest and wetlands. So it's only a very small portion of the quarry that is looking to expand into that core area. Most of that would be preserved. There is a portion that would move into the what we call the linkage, and the linkage is sort of the areas that connect the large core areas. So that is something that we are reviewing, and Michael Cook, our planning ecologist, is having a look at kind of how that would work and what the implications of that would be. There's also various unevaluated wetlands, woodlands, and water features identified across the site, and large portions of the property fall within a karst area shown on Appendix A. So before I was a planner, I've never heard the word karst before, but karst is essentially across the escarpment areas where we live, we see lots of rock, and sometimes there's fractures within that rock, and sometimes those fractures exist underground too. And so when we're digging, if we get to cases where there's fractures in that bedrock, there we have to think about are those fractures providing an easy tunnel for contaminants to enter our groundwater? And so that's something that we've flagged here that we just want to make sure that we get a good grasp on and how that's going to be managed on the site. In terms of comments received, it's been relatively quiet for this file to date, but looking forward to hearing everyone's comments today. We did hear from Grey Sauble Conservation Authority. So as of last year in January, the province removed the authority of conservation authorities to provide ecological review on planning applications. And so the Conservation Authority now reviews just matters of hazard consideration. So they look at kind of the safety elements of the site and making sure that we're interacting with nature in a way that's appropriate for nature and also for us from a safety perspective. And they looked at kind of the work that's been done, and they were generally in agreement with it, acknowledging as long as the recommendations that have been put forward in some of those hydrogeological studies that have been done, provided those are put in place, that it shouldn't be of hazard concern. There's also been some comments that have been provided by the applicant as relayed by different ministries of the province through that Aggregate Resource Act process. But I might let them speak to those because I haven't been thoroughly involved in that process so far to date. So just in terms of next steps from a planning perspective, so we're going to be reviewing any comments received here today, as well as any other comments that are coming in from our agencies that we work with. And we're going to have a detailed review of all of the technical reports and potentially engage with the province as well, and just some of their experts who review a lot of these types of work for as their main job, and sort of get their perspective on some of these studies that have come forward. We'll ensure that any comments that are come forward have been appropriately addressed by the applicant. And then the next step would be to provide a recommendation to County Council for a decision on the official plan amendment. And then generally following that, Georgian Bluffs would provide a recommendation to Georgian Bluffs Council on the zoning bylaw amendment portion. And then it's my understanding that both the official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw amendment kind of have to be neatly dealt with prior to the province issuing a license under the aggregate extraction process. So that's all I have for you today, but happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you, Becky, for the presentation there. Yeah, and we may get to you later on here, so we'll see where this goes, and we'll carry on. Thank you. All right. Members of the public registered with the clerk to provide comments in support of or in opposition to the application. Grant Laux, who is the resident. So if you'd like to come to the mic here and state your comments.
I've got the property north east of the quarry. It's a farm. And owned it since 2011. I've lived there since 2014. And I didn't know there was a quarry there when I bought the place, but I found it pretty quick. So I was, I think I go outside in the morning and I hear the banging from the excavator, I guess it is. There's hammering going on anyway. And I see here that it's supposed to happen between 9 and 3 o'clock, I think, during the daytime. So that's been a bit of a concern because of the vibration that goes along with that as well. What else? So we've got an issue with truck traffic too. Zion Church Road intersects with 17, Gray Road 17. And that's a terrible intersection. A lot of people have died there. But on top of that, the visibility is really bad. You have to be out halfway out in the intersection before you can see traffic coming down 17. And there's a lot of speeding going on both roads. So for me, that's a safety concern, especially when I have cattle. What else do I have here? So yeah, the haulage route was supposed to be mainly on 6, but I'd say a lot of that stuff goes down Zion Church Road as far as dump trucks are concerned currently. So I don't know how that's going to change. And there was a lady had mentioned there's no blasting to occur, but I think in one of the notes it was the summary statement and planning analysis from Cuesta in 2022 mentioned in the acoustic assessment report that drilling and blasting is going to occur. I don't know the context of that. And then they talked about the sound. There's a primary crusher that's supposed to be integrated into a single processing plant, which includes a generator. I don't know if that exists today or not, and what the sound implications might be. It might be nothing. Sorry, I'm just trying to see what else I've got here. They're verbose on what I've got down, but I'm trying to shorthand. Oh, so this there's a lot of modeled scenarios when it comes to the sound, but I'm wondering, you have an existing operation, and I don't know why the modeling was based on a pretend scenario or a proposed scenario as far as the sound and everything else goes. And my property wasn't included in the sound modeling. I'm not sure why. Maybe I'm outside of the distance that they designated. I think that's basically it. I don't know if this is like a formality. There's a draft plan amendment from the county on the website. So maybe that just requires signature. But I think that's all I've got, at least all I can think of at the time. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Lukes, for your comments there. Yeah, no, I'm sure there was some notes taken there, and if you have further questions, please do reach out to us. So on that, the applicant, Don Forbes, and the agents for the application are present. As agents for the applicant, Don Scott and is it Jan Brower, or of Cuesta Planning, are present to respond to questions on the application. Linda Sober of SARS Environment is also here, and Andrew Pentney of Groundwater Science Corporation are also present. They're also here. Donald and Jenny, on up to the mic, or whoever wants to speak to this and do your presentation. Donald, what's coming up?
That one? Okay. Thanks very much for this opportunity to speak to this application. I didn't realize that Becky was going to do such a thorough job for me. I gather I should have gone first so that make hers look like a repetition of mine. But anyway, Mayor Carlton, members of the committee or council and staff, my name's Don Scott, as you mentioned, with Western Planning, and I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to review a bit of the expansion for Forbes Quarry. It's in the old, used to be Keppel Township. And as you mentioned, I have the two of the key people that help with the preparation of the application, Mr. Andrew Pentney, he's the hydrogeologist, and Linda Sober is the project biologist. And Don Forbes is also here to make sure that we do it properly. Now, I'm not going to spend much time on repeating what Becky did. You see the location on map. It's south east of the Wyerton area, bounded by the 17th concession on the south and the Zion Church Road on the east. There is, as was mentioned, there is a similar dimension stone quarry southeast of this, operated by Ted Young. And I won't spend too much time on that. I just, because Becky did a good job of describing the surrounding land use. There are two, as she mentioned, there are two provincial statutes involved with the approval of an aggregate operation, the Aggregate Resources Act and then the Planning Act. And the public and agency consultation is a proponent-driven process under the Aggregate Resources Act. And in this regard, we initiated the public and agency consultation in February of 2023, and we held a public information session in the Wyerton Curling Club on February 22nd. A number of neighbors attended, and their principal concern was any impact it might have on their wells. And Andrew Pentney was in attendance, and he met with them and eventually added them to his monitoring program of surrounding wells. So they seemed to be fairly content when they left the meeting. We also received comments from several agencies, including Natural Resources, Ministry of the Environment, DFO, Species at Risk, and the County of Grey. And we've responded to these agencies, and to date, we have received sign-off from DFO as well as Ministry of the Environment with regard to the Hydro-G report. And as part of the complete application requirements under the Planning Act, the County of Grey required additional information, which was provided to staff earlier this year, and they were then prepared to enter into the Planning Act process. And to date, we have no outstanding objections to the aggregate aspect of this proposal. Yeah, thank you. The Forbes Quarry is one of the oldest in the area and has been extracting building stone for well over half a century. The figure shows the operation plan, which starts with the initial 12.5 hectare existing licensed area, which is a Class A below water quarry. And the new one is an extension of the similar type of license, Class A below water quarry. The quarry is part of a 165 hectare site, which is roughly 710 acres. And that of that property, 87 hectares roughly will be licensed, but only 57 hectares of that will be actually extracted. So it's quite a bit smaller. And the major, as Becky inferred, there's a major wooded area in the west corner, and that is not going to be form any part of the license. So it's going to remain as part of a woodland area. And as was mentioned, the quarry is presently licensed for 100,000 tons a year, and that will be 100,000 tons for the expansion as well. The concession 17 will continue to be the haul route, and the entrance on that will remain where it is for the duration of the quarry. The hours of operation will be similar, 7 to 5 during the week, no quarrying on the weekend or holidays. Noise will be controlled primarily by burns, and any dust on site has to remain on site, and they generally just apply water to the internal routes. Now, the acoustical assessment is required as part of the application, and that was prepared by RDW, and they're a well-known firm out of the Guelph area. But to be quite honest, it's really the existing type of operation is just going to continue. It's just going to be on the larger area. As was mentioned, the expansion will permit quarrying up to 7 meters below the predicted groundwater table now. And I'm going to have Andrew comment on that, because to me, it's a bit of black magic what goes on under the ground. So I'll let him comment on that. I think the next slide is going to be the rehabilitation, which was touched on briefly by Becky. The large wooded area in the northwest is going to remain, and the rehabilitation plan will shows a link, and stated right on the rehabilitation plan that will form the link between the wooded area in the northeast and the county forest lands on the south side of Concession Road 17. The final RIA plan is, as mentioned, a series of small ponds and lakes of varying levels, and the shorelines will be developed and wetlands will be created. So it's sort of going back to a natural setting. Is probably a little bit more attractive and environmentally friendly than what's there right now. Basically, the justification uses the provincial policy statement as a key document when looking at all of these provincial resources that have to be assessed as part of the aggregate operation. The first one that we looked at was the mineral resources, and the type of dimension stone at the Forbes Quarry, and within this area of what I call a Saugeen Indian Peninsula, because Keppel and Sarawak were also included in that. It's not just the Bruce Peninsula. I don't want people to get confused in that. There are two units of the Aramasa member in this quarry, the middle unit and the marble unit. And these are the principal sources of flagstone and building stone that have been mined for well over 50 years on this site and well over 100 years in the general area. And it's interesting, the 1988 Ontario Geographic Survey indicates that the McCartney Quarry, which is now the Forbes Quarry, is a significant source of the Aramasa stone, which is very unique to this particular area. There are a series of technical studies in addition that have to be prepared. One of them is the Natural Environment Technical Report, and that looks at all the natural heritage features that are on the site, and if they are there, they describe how they can mitigate any negative impact on them. And those natural heritage resources are determined by the 7 features that are identified in the provincial policy statement. And I'll let Linda Sober talk to those if there are any questions about that. As well, you're required under the Aggregate Resources Act to retain an archaeologist to look at not only the property from an archaeological perspective, but also the cultural heritage site as well. And we did retain a group called Fisher Archaeological Consulting to provide this technical study. And I find these studies to be quite interesting as they trace the history of the site as well as the surrounding area. And the Forbes site was part of the Colpoys Bay Reserve that was surrendered in 1861. And the existing quarry seems to have its origins on the site from the early 1970s. There's a protocol for carrying out these studies, and that was completed. The report was submitted to the Ontario Ministry of Culture, and it was entered into the Public Registry of Archaeological Reports and accepted in 2021. The last slide I have basically deals with water, which is very critical for not only the on-site resources, but the impact on surrounding areas. And Andrew Pentney has been working with Don and Tony for over a decade, monitoring the water on the existing quarry and then providing the technical studies for the proposed expansion. And he played a very key role in developing the rehabilitation plan, establishing the water management program for it. And it's interesting to note that the hydrogeologist from the Ministry of the Environment met with Andrew on site for a joint inspection and has provided a letter of clearance for that aspect of the application. Now, just to summarize, the extraction of dimension stone from this quarry, as well as other quarries in this area, has contributed to the local economy of the area for over a century. In fact, there is one quarry in the area that has been exporting wired marble to Italy. Usually it's the other way around. It's an extremely valuable commodity. Now we've finished wrapping up the Aggregate Resource Act portion of the application, and we are now entering the Planning Act section, and I just simply ask your support through that aspect of the application, and I will be prepared to answer any questions. Probably will let Linda and Andrew answer them as well.
Thank you, Don, for that presentation. If it's okay with council, I was going to see if Linda and or Andrew had a comment. I want just an overview of what they got. Linda, would you like to say a few words? Sure. Just come up to the mic there. Sorry. You hit the little button on the bottom there, turn the red light will come on. Perfect.
Great. Linda Sober from Star Environmental Limited. Live in Georgian Bluffs. I don't know if that matters, but know the habitat. Started the field work, I believe, in 2017. I was reviewing that last week and a bit last night. So initially for a natural environment technical report, you do a 3-season survey, 3 to 4. If you have an area of dense, larger mammals for winter, then you add the track survey in, snow cover. So we've been out 2017, 2018, a little bit in 2019 to see if a whippoorwill came back, which it did not. Sometimes they're flying on the full moon, spring and middle of the summer, the strawberry moon we just passed through in June. And we did have one initially in 2017 out on site where we were out close to midnight with some of the Saugeen and Jibway Nation environmental monitors. And I can't remember if Doran Ritchie was with us or not at that time, but we've had early consultation in that sense with Saugeen members out on 2 different occasions. And I was happy that they could hear this whippoorwill. Since then, we've replicated those studies on 2 different times and with an update in 2022. And the habitat has changed over time, a little normal vegetation succession that you see with shrub cover where there was not any, and it doesn't like it that dense. We'll usually get to a field that if it's 35% shrub coming in, then the whippoorwills are going off to find something a little more rocky and open. So we did that. Certainly did studies for the aquatics, looked at what kind of minnow species are there, the other breeding birds. The whippoorwill were part of the nightjar survey, so in the evening, like American woodcock, the ones that embarrass myself. No, I don't even think I can get embarrassed anymore in this job. The woodcock at night sounds like beep, 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 right? So that one's there. But then you find it, and that's one thing, early spring, and then you answer whether it stays and the test of time for breeding in summer. So a lot of the breeders, I'll walk over here and just show you. Kind of a license area. It's about here. There's also another wetland falling outside the licensed area. And why that's important is we went back for a team inspection with the hydrogeologist, Andrew. Andrew and I went back in because some of the water flows in a seasonal sense. It's not year round or anything. You could cross it right now and not get wet, but spring and fall, it does contribute to the forested wetland. And we've got spotted salamanders in there that are breeding. And if you had potentially some of this aggregate operation that was digging too deep there, for instance, or diverting the water, which is easily done on a number of these types of sites. Not to say it could dry up that wetland, but it would alter the hydrology at the very least. And then it would be, if I were asked about continuous maintenance of that species, that would be a question mark. So we visited that in detail and looked at maintaining that flow such that any crossings of the drainage would be top of bank to top of bank. So nothing going in, no work in water there. And as well, we've got provisions there for mitigation that if anything were to occur there in the future, some provisional flow would have to still continue their spring and fall to that wetland. And sometimes it takes the form of, if you picture a septic bed, perforated O-pipe, that type of thing. So that's sort of a backup plan if. I like to have a whole list of what happens if you need this. So that's my answer for if you need that. It's not on the books to do anything there, but that's also in my reporting about here's a form of mitigation if that were to occur. So that's also an area of interest. And I suppose one of the items, which is an important item for a quarry land use, is the rehabilitation plan. So if you look at this land use aggregate extraction compared to, well, what are their land uses? Subdivision, golf course, they're all, well, I don't know, I guess some golf courses can lay fallow. Cobble Beach is going to be a golf course forever, I feel. But a subdivision is a pretty hard structure and hard surface, and there's no after plan for that. So in a strange way, as a biologist, I like working on the quarries because there's a finite time that you're extracting the resource, and then you have the opportunity to create some habitat. And at the end of this story, because it was farmed, like if we looked back 100 years and presently for some parts of it, then instead of some of the fields or fallow fields, we're adding different aquatic features and different types of forest. We received, oh, before I get to the county comments, the water features are planned to be a variety of different depths. And not just because of the plan about where the aggregate is and how deep the Aramosa layer is and how much is coming out, because that can change and be tweaked. As I've seen on some of these active quarries, sometimes they find more, sometimes they find less. And that can change that final dimension of what's left over. So if you're planning for a foot of water, you might have 4 inches of water that's seasonal. And then you've got opportunity. And we used to draw up these rehabilitation plans in a finite sense, and we'd have one list. Well, and then it doesn't respond to these various conditions that come up. So this one, that's called learning with age. This one, we've got a variety of prescriptions. So I ended up calling them prescriptions, where from shallow water, one of the examples is a caladium fen. And it's a fen, it's a wetland type that we usually have more on the Huron side as you go up the Bruce Peninsula, but it's a wetland that is less common, certainly local, but it's less common in a representative sense. So it's an opportunity to add to that habitat where it wasn't there before. And that's an example of a shallow water habitat. And the other thing I wanted to say, I need to point over there again, but we did receive some review comments from county, and they're quite helpful in that they speak to the climate change action plan, and that was written. Just so you know, I think if the pen dropped on that 2022, and that was midstream of all this work. So we also went and looked at it because it hadn't been written yet, and some comments had been about carbon sequestering and making some soil layers. And some of that can happen through reforestation. So parts of the rehabilitation plan do speak to trees, but I'll show you where and why the strength of the corridors for wildlife and black bear, for instance, are northwest and at the larger core area that comes across, that's hundreds of acres when you look at it on the landscape versus this one corner at the bottom. All right, so then I'm just going to gesture. So that north is up, north, south, east, west, cardinal points. So southeast corner, you see the 4-way sort of intersection. So that area there, now we've added some more trees in response to some of the county comments, and I understand where they're coming from for global warming and maintaining more trees in a net gain sense. However, the main corridor that I've seen, like just through bear scat or in wildlife, and the amount of trees is to the northwest. And if I had my druthers, if I had the magic wand today, I wouldn't wave it at the bottom there, the bottom right, because that corner is not as crazy as Copper Kettle as far as sight lines, but it's bad for wildlife, and it's bad for wildlife now. And I don't want to, that's something we can't sort of see on the maps and at a broad brush level, where we've got the core areas, right, and the linkages. So ground truthing, when you're down there and actually looking and watching the amount of roadkill, for instance, it's not a great candidate area to beef up for that reason. Now, with the water feature, and that's not to say, I mean, the water feature can change. You can step it up. You can put soil in the base of that, and you can grow trees, but they'd have to be all wetland trees. But it's still inducing more wildlife than are presently using that crossing at their peril. And when you have an aquatic feature, The beauty of that is the avifauna, the birds, and also the bats. Anything flying is not subject to the same degree of the windshield collision and just being killed under the wheels. So that's an important part there in the rehabilitation. We've responded in 2 areas with greater incoming deciduous trees because there's a little plantation block sitting just under the drainage, and that's on the fireproofing and fire smart guidelines. That's considered a fire risk. And that's not the only reason we're trying to replace that with deciduous growth over time. Some young poplars, like a starter crop, and then some of the deciduous sugar maple. Partly it's because the soil matter that you've got under red pine plantation, for instance, it's all friable and it's needle duff and it's very acidic and it's dry. And I don't know, think of the last plantation you walk through, it's dry, but it doesn't look like it's changed over time too much as far as soil decomposition and creation. Whereas when you've got a mixed forest, and you've got these broadleaf components, it's moisture, it brings water in, and then it decomposes and it gets you to the soil layer that helps with the carbon base to sequester carbon. So that becomes valuable for reaching our goals there with the climate change, just trying to create a carbon sink. And the water features, we added something in there after reading that plan, and I'm glad the comments were raised in some of the preliminary comments back from Becky and the group, the ecological planners, because what the water features need to create their own carbon sink, first you picture the hard dull stone. It's like marble, so it's hard and so flat. I think you've all seen it from living here. Then you can create soil in itself, but you have to create it. You have to put some dead fallen log in there, some actual detritus and some matter, some soil backfilled in. And we did sections of this at the Dundrum Quarry years ago. And I'd say years ago, where it was hanging off of the front end loaders, and we were placing soil in for plants to grow. But the same type of situation here on the aquatic areas, but with the purpose of creating a substrate where there isn't one, and it enriches it. So just to get back to acting as a carbon sink. So those are kind of the key parts of why I'm interested in the rehabilitation plan. And my daughter used to go and grow all of these things in a tiny little greenhouse we have and put them out there. And now she's past her MSc and growing up, and I am not planting hundreds of shrubs. So someone else locally is going to have to come and help with that. But it does work. And we do see species come in even within the same year that you're planting things. And it's quite fascinating. Not the hundreds in a day that she can do that I can't, but you watch dragonflies coming in and you do a species list of before and after. And it's sort of proof in the pudding. You see it with your very own eyes. And those are just the key points of a number of years of fascinating jumping out there and a look-see of what's there, and open to any questions at all.
Thanks, Linda, for giving us that look into that piece of it there. That's interesting. So thank you. Andrew, would you like to pop in and say a few words?
Do I need to? No, I'm good. Okay. My name is Andrew Pentney, professional geoscientist in Stratford, Ontario. I've been working with Don and Tony Forbes at their existing quarry for a number of years. We implement monitoring programs according to the existing license conditions and monitoring specifications developed with the MNR and MECP. And through that process, first, maybe I should back up a second. I wasn't prepared to make a presentation. I thought I was answering questions, but I think what some in order to get a basic understanding of how water really works in this landscape, you need to start with the geology. And I think it's been referenced here at this site. You have at surface or near surface, a formation called the Aramosa Formation, and it's the target stone for the dimension for the quarry. They use it to make dimension stone. They actually, there's no blasting involved in removing it, that layer. It's at this site, it's physically broken. I believe Mr. Laux referenced a hammer, and that's what they do. They use a hammer on the end of an excavator to break apart the rock, and then they scoop it out with loaders and take it and sort it into various sizes. So it's a low, that's why there's no blasting involved. It's a lower impact sort of extraction. Below the Aramosa unit, then you have what was referenced as the used to be the Amabel Formation. Now it's been subdivided into different packages, but it's a more massive dolostone that you really can't break apart. You need to either cut it into blocks and remove it or blast it. So the proposal is Tony and Don have identified areas that the Aramosa Formation extends across the property. The proposal is to remove that layer, but not go into the underlying more massive dolostone. And as Linda referenced, there's a certain amount of variation in the way that layer goes across the site, and so the extraction and rehabilitation plan is really developed to allow the operator to access all of that layer. Actual extraction may not be as deep in certain areas as is shown on the plan, because they need to follow the top, that harder dolostone layer, in order to remove the Aramosa unit. And so it's what you see there, what you see on the extraction plan is sort of a maximum of what could be. I certainly expect it to be not quite as deep in certain areas, but that only the future will tell that. And the way this geology controls surface water and groundwater flow across this area, this whole area, the Aramosa unit, it's finer layered. It is a lot of horizontal partings in that in the unit, and it's very tight and dense, and it tends to reduce how much water can get into the ground. And so you'll have water entering in where it can, flowing along the horizontal fractures and down across the landscape. What that does is it tends to pond up water. So if you have major rainfalls like we're having now, or in the spring when you have your freshet, snow melts, you'll have large scale flow of water right across the land surface, which we definitely see at this site. And Linda's referenced it, how we together we went out and tracked some of it and tracked its movement across the site, and just the way and help design the extraction and rehabilitation plan to maintain that movement to certain key features. The way the water table works is there's during that spring or high rainfall periods, you'll have the water table fluctuate up into the Aramosa unit. And we certainly see that at the existing quarry. We have a lot of observational data at the quarry where we see at times of higher water inputs, spring, heavy rainfall. You'll see water coming out along some of the fracture systems that are coming out within this Aramosa unit and come into the quarry. And that's water that needs to be managed within the quarry. And they do it now through a lot of gravity drainage, simply moving it across the site and letting it pond up in areas and infiltrate into the more major dolostone aquifer. Now through the summer, the water table tends to drop down either within the Aramosa unit or sometimes right into the lower dolostone. And so when this is classified as a below water table extraction, that's true because at times the water table is up within the Aramosa unit that's being extracted. But through a lot of the year, depending on where you are on the site, the water table will actually be below the some of the extraction areas, some of the extraction depths that they have now, and within the extraction area proposed. If we could go back to the to that rehabilitation plan. Yeah, that's right. So there's two shades of blue. The darker blue are the deeper areas of water. And the lighter blue is an area that we're predicting will actually have some water through the early part of the year and then be dry over the rest of the year. And that area is some of the area of that specialized habitat Linda's talking about. Provides them an opportunity to establish that habitat. So with regard to groundwater impacts, we have around the existing quarry a really good sense of how quarry operations affect the water table. We have direct measurement of that, and we really use that information to predict what should happen around the expanded area. And that approach was certainly appreciated by the ministry. We also did a theoretical projection of what it could be, and between the combination of the observed and the theoretical predicted, we have a good idea of how the water resources in the area are affected, and based on what we're seeing around the existing quarry, we're expecting a really tight zone of influence that will be actually, it may only be seasonal because they're extracting the Aramosa layer, which for reference is perhaps as high as the from the floor to the ceiling. It's not, they're not going very deep following this unit. And because the water table, drops down within it, the amount of water entering the quarry is kind of fluctuates. And in the summers, sometimes there's no water entry. So, we have a good sense of how impacts will expand based, as compared to the existing. Dawn has asked me to, Dawn has asked me to comment briefly on karst. We've had karst assessments completed. I'm not a karst expert, but I'm a geologist and I've helped with that assessment. And I can sort of summarize it as the existing Aramosa unit with its horizontal predominant fractures. As water flows along those fractures, you'll have some of the rock dissolve, and this is over thousands of years. And so you can have larger conduit networks through the rock, which can allow for rapid water movement through those features. And so that's, we see no karstic within the existing quarry. We see no significant evidence of karst or large conduits, large inflows of water. You look for two things: large inflows of water. Say in a naturalized landscape, you look for a large inflow of water into the ground, so a disappearing stream, or large springs where these conduits come up to surface and allow water to move up. And I believe Shallow Lake is an example of an area of a large volume of a karstic feature with a large flow of groundwater to surface. We don't see any of those features on site, and we've had a karst expert walk the remainder of the site, and there's really sees no evidence of that on those processes on site. And in addition, he's recommended some responses to situations in the future where if extraction encounters those features, what can be done. So that I think I've covered that aspect of it. And so again, I'm available for questions or answers.
Thanks, Andrew, for that
Thank you.
presentation too. There's a lot of information there too. So, all right, we've done the presentation piece of it. Does council have any questions or comments regarding the proposed application? Isaac, Councillor Shouldice.
Hi, thank you, Deputy Mayor Pringle. My question is related to the rehabilitation phase. There are quarries that exist today locally, and not even really locally, but through the province. Killarney is another really good example of this, where they promise to do their job, they have their quarry, and then they promise a rehabilitation, but it doesn't end up actually happening. So my question is, do we have an absolute guarantee that this property is going to be rehabilitated? And what guarantees do we have that this is going to happen? Is the company prepared to pay levies into a fund to help pay for this?
Thank you, Councillor Shouldice, for the question. Who would like to take that question?
I'm going to answer purely from the biological standpoint of this, but I think it gets to the nub of the matter anyway. The phasing that you noticed in the rehabilitation plan, there's compliance monitoring officers at the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. To keep remembering that F part. And so they come out to check on, so let's say phase one, they go into phase one, they've extracted, now they're into progressive rehabilitation. First of all, they can't get to phase two without progressively rehabilitating phase one. It's the rule. And onward for phase two, phase three, phase four. And it's a great question, but just to know that there's a process there, and I suppose I trust it because I see it. And most of the abandoned pits and quarries that I'm aware of from the Browning report are pretty old ones. In 70s, 80s that were left. And that's where the tipping fees came about for the truck haulage to pay for fixing up these holes that were left a long time ago. So anyway, that's my quick answer from my knowledge and my on-site knowledge. MNRF, compliance monitoring officer or aggregate officer, comes out and must inspect this process, and they can't get to the next one without the rehab on the first one. And I'm sure Donald has a much better planning answer for that. But that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Linda, for that. Follow up there, Councillor Shouldice.
Oh, sorry, I muted myself and couldn't get it off. Yeah, thanks for your response. I guess I'm generally speaking in support of this. I just want to make sure that it's going to be rehabilitated, that things are going to see fit, and that this isn't just another quarry locally or province-wide that gets walked away from, and that the community feels that they're ripped off as well in this. So thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Shouldice. Councillor Day, you have a question?
I appreciate Councillor Shouldice's question. I had a similar one and appreciate the answer. I'm glad to hear from Linda that the rehabilitation process happens with more modern quarries. I had another question as well. I was doing a little bit of reading about, I believe it was Brampton, and one of their criteria for development is if a natural heritage region or area becomes available through the process, or it could be separated out in some way. They have a criteria that natural feature be given to the municipality to help work them toward the 30-30, protecting 30% of land and 30% of water. We exceed 30% at the moment. I believe, if I read correctly, that we are about 43% forested in Georgian Bluffs or Grey County. Someone might need to correct me on that one. But it just came to mind as something I would be curious about, how that relates into possibly this quarry, possibly a longer range vision. I realized that I didn't ask any particular person this question, so I would be interested in hearing from those who have expertise in the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Day. Who would like to take a crack at that? Don?
Not too sure what the question was. There's always a concern about, well, we've seen pits and quarries that have never been rehabilitated. And that was true years and years ago. In fact, now when you you have to pay an annual levy, cork levy, and 0.5% of that goes to rehabilitating old, primarily gravel pits back into anything that's above the water table that gets rehabilitated primarily to agricultural activities. Now, as far as abandoned quarries, I think last count there's about 40 of them that have been abandoned, and nature has turned them into provincially significant wetlands. So they are, as one thing, as Linda indicated, when you have a quarry or a pit below the water table, you can have much more interesting rehabilitation plans that add a lot more to the environment than was there before. Now, who's going to own those when it's all said and done? There are a number of options. I know in some areas, the conservation authorities make a deal to take over it, especially if there's a water base to it. There's other environmental organizations. I know the Escarpment Biosphere Reserve, they're interested in assuming the long-term responsibility for these because they're natural areas when they're all done. But maybe the municipality will want to take over the rehabilitation plan when it's done. And those things have to be done because you have to turn that license back in. So there's always the concern, oh, well, you're never going to do this, you're never going to do that. Well, yeah, that's why you have inspectors. And it's like a zoning bylaw amendment. The people that really enforce it are the neighbors. They're the ones that call the municipality and you send your truant officer out to correct the issue. So this is not, the 1940s. This is a totally different scenario, a new system that we've got in there. The ministry is very particular about these, and they do respond. They'll really monitor new quarries and pits for the first 10 years very closely. And of the, you pay about 19.5 cents a ton. And the municipality gets 12 cents now. They used to get half that. And the province gets a bunch of money out of that. And they're supposed to, who can trust the province? They're supposed to be putting that back into monitoring quarries and enforcement and things of that nature. So it's a different system than it was way back when.
Thanks, Don, for that. Councillor Day, to follow up to that? You're muted.
Will unmute myself. Thank you so much, Don, for answering my poorly worded question. I do appreciate your expertise and the ideas about who may be interested in the long run for protecting the wetlands that can be created. I think it's I really appreciated the detailed information about the rehabilitation plan today. It's an exciting prospect of an industrial activity. If I may stick with the rehabilitation plan for one more follow-up question, I just wanted to reconcile something from the very, very first presentation where I didn't quite understand how there was unevaluated wetlands, woodlands, and water features. So that was on one of the first slides. And then because it feels like there was a lot of evaluation of the natural heritage features that were present.
I may not be the expert on that, but the evaluated water wetlands generally end up, they do those assessments in order to determine whether they're provincially significant or not. There's a lot of wet areas that aren't evaluated, and that's one of the purposes of doing a natural environment technical study is to go in and assess these unevaluated ones, and they are evaluated, and then you determine whether they are significant or not significant. What do they add to the operation, and can you improve them? And that's one of the big advantages of hiring a well-qualified biologist, because this rehabilitation plan certainly is a well thought out and environmentally friendly, we'll call it, rehabilitation plan. It's going to certainly be when it's done, I'm not going to be here to watch it. Maybe a number of us won't be, but it's going to be a very attractive environment when it's all done, much more so than it is right now.
Thank you, Don, for that.
Okay.
Can I follow up there, Councillor Day?
Yes, absolutely.
Yep.
Right.
Any further questions from council? I'm not seeing any further comments. Thanks, Don. All right. Oh, Toby, sorry. Follow up again. I have one more here, Don. You're muted again.
It's a different question. I wanted to give
No.
other people a chance to speak if they had anything to say. I just actually have a question through you, Chair, to our staff. I noted there was a recommendation for milk snake crossing signage in the report, and that I was wondering if the staff had picked up on that and if there were plans in the works for adding some snake protection signage, and if there weren't, if there could be.
The staff, like, Michael, you want to take that one?
Thank you.
Michael Cook will speak to it.
All right.
Give him a chance.
Thanks for your question. Most of the mitigation measures within the EIS that's been provided are going to be recommended as conditions of approval. So snake signage can be one of those as well, amongst a bunch of other things. Just to comment on the other unevaluated wetland kind of question is, the unevaluated wetlands are basically wetlands that haven't gone through the Ontario Wetland Evaluation System protocol to be deemed either provincially significant, locally significant. They're known as unevaluated wetlands, but they're also called just other wetlands. So they're wetlands that aren't deemed provincially significant, basically. But yeah, as for snake signage, I'm sure that can be done relatively easily. That's one of the easier mitigation measures for sure. So we'll be recommending that, definitely.
Thank you, Michael, for that. Follow up there, Councillor Day?
No, thank you. That was a fantastic answer.
Yep, thank you. Yep, Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Chair Pringle. Just a couple of remarks, again, regarding the rehabilitation program. I certainly hope that our best defense or mitigation is not having to rely on neighbors to monitor and police the situation. I don't see that as the role of the neighbors. I would hope that, though I'm not often confident, that the appropriate agencies are providing proper monitoring and inspection for those kinds of things. But we hear often that they don't have the staff. They're under resourced and overworked, and those kinds of things sometimes fall by the wayside. So I do hope that the quarry owners are committed to appropriate and effective rehabilitation and adhering to the plans that are before us. Thank you.
Great comments. Any other comments questions from council? I'm not seeing any. All right. Again.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Isaac.
One more. Thank you. Just one more follow-up question on the rehabilitation process. What happens to these plans if the property owner has these plans to rehabilitate? What happens to these plans if the property is sold before actually being rehabilitated?
Good question.
That, when you get an approved site plan, rehabilitation plan, operations plan, that's provincial law. What is on there is enforceable by the province. If somebody, it's an odd question in that I don't think anybody would buy it unless they're planning to quarry the property. And I think that you're going to have an encumbrance on that property until it is rehabilitated and the license is given back. Now, it's going to be 35 years from now, maybe, but it's there. It's law, provincial law. And every one of those notes on the operations plan is an enforceable requirement. That goes for the rehabilitation plan as well.
For that. Councilor Schroeder, answer your question.
No follow-up. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. All right, thanks, Don. All right, if there is no further questions, I'm gonna call this to make a decision on the motion. So the motion is that staff report DEB 2024-040 Z09-23 Forbes Quarry expansion be received for information relative to the July 10th, 2024 public hearing. I need a mover and a seconder. Mr. Thompson, Mr. Winters, discussion? Not seeing any discussion. I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? That is carried. And I'll call for an adjournment of this hearing. I need a mover and a seconder. Mayor Carlton, Councilor Coburn, discussion. I'll call, call the vote. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? I'm ahead of myself. That is carried. This public meeting is now adjourned. Thank you for everyone that came to the meeting tonight. Thanks for attending. Give them a second to make their way out and we'll carry on. Maybe they want to stay. All right, we'll carry on with delegations and public question period. 7.1 items on the agenda. Any person who wishes to appear before council regarding an item on the agenda shall make written application to the clerk by 3 p.m. the day of the meeting. To register, www.georgianbluffs.ca/delegations or call the clerk's office 519-376-2729 extension 603. Items not on the agenda. Any person who wishes to appear before council regarding an item not on the agenda may make a written application to the clerk by the Thursday preceding the meeting they wish to speak at. To register, www.georgianbluffs.ca/delegations or call the clerk's office at 519-376-2729 extension 603. We do have one item on tonight, 7.2.1, Gordon Iyer, Bonnie Beach Road drainage. Gordon, would you like to come to the microphone? You have 10 minutes to comment.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity. I think probably the best thing to do would be to start at the beginning, which is the mid-1980s. And at that time, the property owners of 5 lots, which were originally known as Concession 3, Lot 24, Parts 1 to 16, are now known as 454, 460, 466, 470, and 474 Balmy Beach Road. The owners at the time requested permission from the Township of Sarawak to develop the lots, and the township requested that in order to grant that permission that they do 2 things. One is to pipe in fresh water, which was accomplished through, I guess, a shore well across the other side of the street. And secondly, to construct a ditch roughly, in some cases, 260 to 320 feet from Balmy Beach Road, from the paved road itself. And that ditch ran north and south, and it started on the north end at 474 Balmy Beach Road, ran through 470, 466, 460, and 454. And at 454, it then went south under the road into Owen Sound Bay. The ditch was lined with white stone, as I remember when I moved in 1990. And the permits to build were approved, and the last of the 5 houses were completed in 1990. It was at the time, and is still the understanding of the 5 owners, that the township would maintain the ditch as required. For the first 30 years, roughly, the ditch worked efficiently, directing water from the higher ground. We've got the escarpment behind us, from that higher ground, and ran into the bay as intended. During that time, there was no ditch maintenance from the township. Wasn't really required. The water was flowing quite well. In recent times, the ditch has failed to meet the requirements on the basis that it's now full of silt and mud. And instead of being a meter or so deep, it's right up to the top. I can walk right across without knowing there's a depression there at all. We thought as owners that the mud flowing into the ditch following heavy rains was coming from the escarpment, and that's what the ditch was planned to do. But there's so much growth and vegetation there now that it's very doubtful that it was any mud coming down at all. So we were wrong in that assumption, and it's turned out that the mud, in fact, is coming from the north of us, from the north of 474, where the ditch ends at the north end. And it would appear that someone has cut in to our ditch with another ditch behind the houses just north of us. And also the water's coming down from the Alexandra Street subdivision. So the ditch is completely full. Probably totally in my property, 470, 466, and partially 460. There's no actual flow of the water. It's actually running into our properties. I find it difficult to mow the grass in the spring because it's just flooded. And 3 years ago, we reported this to the township of Georgian Bluffs. Staff came out, met with the 5 owners, inspected the properties, and said that they would agree to clear it out. But in order to do so, they needed access. Now, the only property in their deeds that has access would be 466. I think that's right, isn't it, Doc? Yeah, 466. The rest of us don't have it in the deeds at all. But we were asked at the time to give written permission, which we did. And in the fall of 2021, we thought it was going to be completed, but nothing ever happened. Unfortunately, just prior to that, the heavy rains caused flooding, not only on our properties, but also across the street in the houses that border the bay. And one in particular had to replace the whole basement. And we found out that although our ditch has been cut into without our permission, we have no idea when it was done, and we have no idea who gave the permission. We do know that to the south of us, there is another ditch that runs not north to south, but south to north, that connects to our ditch, and the township of Sarawak gave permission for that to be done in the year 2000. But as far as the mud and silt coming into our ditch, and we know where it's coming from, it's clear, easy to see. We have no idea who gave them permission to do that. We've talked to our neighbors to the north, and they deny ever doing it. And the ditch itself that's cutting into ours is actually on somebody else's property. Now, the 5 properties I'm talking about go back from Balmy Beach Road 800 feet, and they're 132 feet wide. So they're big lots. The houses to the north are narrower lots and only go back 160 feet. So the property behind those houses with the 160-foot lots is owned by whoever's developing the Alexandra Street subdivision. Now, the 5 owners, we have the same concern, and that is that if flooding continues to our neighbors across the street, they're going to be suing us and you and just about everyone else involved. So we'd like to get the thing resolved as soon as possible. Now, I know that staff are aware of this, and they've told me in a couple of emails that they're going to investigate and report back to council either in the fall or the winter. We've been through this before. It's too late. If we get heavy rains, which we could from any one of these wacky storms coming from the Gulf of Mexico, we're going to have severe flooding again, and the ditch isn't doing its job. In addition, the water that is flowing into the ditch is filthy. It's muddy, and it never used to be that way. So the first question is, did the township of Georgian Bluffs give permission for anyone north of us to cut into the ditch on our properties? We'd like to know the answer to that.
Well, great question. We'll have to basically take that back. Sorry, acting CAO, no comment. Okay. We'll have to certainly do some homework on this to see what is going to come out of this.
Okay.
We'll need a notice in motion to bring a report back.
I'm happy to just take that direction.
Take
That's
direction.
a difficult question to answer at right now, considering I don't have the history. But I'm happy to take it back and perform that investigation behind the scenes.
Yeah, you probably have to go back maybe 5 to 10 years at the most. What do you think that, guys, about that? When the ditch was put in? Yeah, the concern that we have is that if we own that ditch, which we're told we do, it's on our properties. The township won't come on our properties without our permission. We understand that, and we're quite willing to give the permission. There's also another ditch that I mentioned comes on the property immediately south of the ditch that runs west to east and goes under the road and out into the bay. The property to the south of that, there's granted access in the year 2000 for equipment to go up there and clean the ditches out. Now, whether that included ours or not, we don't know. But it's the same area, and their ditch runs into ours anyway.
All right, well, we'll certainly, I can say always taking away direction to have a look at those ditches here again, and she'll do her piece on it here. We'll go from there. So, do you have any further questions for us, Gordon, or?
I think that what we'd like clarification of is our understanding was that it was the township's responsibility. Never done, probably never needed until this time. Is that still the case now, or are we responsible for it?
So I'll be, say, I'll do some investigating into that, and we'll look.
Okay.
All right.
Anything to add?
You'll have to come up to the mic.
Yeah. This is Don Bartley.
I live at 466, and we moved in December or February of 21. In the spring of 21 is when there was a massive rainstorm, and instead of the water running down to the ditch, the ditch was not functioning, and the water went between Gord's house and my house to the point that it was within about 1 foot of the window, basement window. And you could have kayaked down there. It was a torrent. But my concern is with that Alexander subdivision, that there's no holding pond up there for the development site going on now. And they have ditches that were probably put in, but I'm not sure that they've been monitored for silt runoff. And those ditches run on the Alexander Street. Those are north-south. But then there are 2 ditches that run east-west, west heading towards the bluff, and all of that water is being directed down either just north or even right on the property line of 474. So any silt from that subdivision is coming down into our ditch, which is already full and not working properly. Thank you.
Don, acting CEO.
Thank you. And I just wanted to take a moment to highlight that in this year's budget cycles, Balmy Beach drainage was a large discussion that this council did consider. We did include $2.25 million to address Balmy Beach drainage concerns as a whole. And what our delegates have done a really good job of this evening is identifying drainage as an issue throughout the entire community of Balmy Beach. While I do understand that these 5 addresses seem to be largely impacted by the drainage, I do want to highlight that it is important to understand the larger scope of drainage issues on Balmy Beach to address all of these smaller issues that affect the entire community as a whole. So through that budget allocation, and I will say in 2024, that was $250,000 that went towards engineering plans, etc., to inform the larger drainage program that will be implemented over the next phases of budget iterations throughout the next few years. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Yep. Over.
So I appreciate that information. I also appreciate how it feels when your property is being impacted by flooding waters, and it is very time sensitive. So what is our expected outlook for accomplishing some actionable work in terms of the drainage issues in Balmy? Like, are we looking at next year, within 2 years?
Michael?
Thank you for that, and you, Deputy Mayor, to Councilor Coburn. When you look at Balmy Beach and drainage issues as a whole, it's quite complex. As Delia mentioned, we have partially built subdivisions. Not sure what the drainage impacts that were supposed to be, or sorry, drainage works that were supposed to be put in place, if they are indeed fully constructed or not yet, that sort of thing. So there's, there's definitely the big picture that needs to be looked at. There's within that big picture though, there are the smaller components. And I think that, that this area in particular could use some more immediate investigation. I don't know what timelines would look like right now. We'd have to talk to our engineer group that's looking at the whole thing to see what kind of work could be done in that area to make improvements. And there is the whole matter of gaining access to it, which I don't think is a big problem. I'm sure with willing residents, we can figure that out rather quickly. But I think from a staff's perspective, it's important for us to kind of just go away for a little bit, take a look at what we can do in the short term, and then come back to council with whatever.
Thanks, but we have to follow up.
Happy to hear you say that there could be some short-term objectives that can be accomplished. I get that there's the larger picture that's complex. For sure, we have to look at that. But again, if you're a property owner and you're looking out your basement window and the water's right there, surely there are some measures that we can put in place more quickly that will help protect those homes.
Sure, great comment. Councillor Thompson.
Well, I think my comments support that. I like the general idea of a community-wide approach, but I guess what jumps out for me a bit is these particular landowners have a bit of a unique situation where the ditch is going across their land. So we could go ahead and do a bunch of community stuff and then them find themselves, well, I'm still on the outside looking in because this isn't a municipal road ditch. This is my own ditch. So I think the two processes in my mind, I'd like to see us treat them as differently. I think I don't know the details, but it sounds to me like I think we've got to do some research about this written agreement. So if there's a written agreement to do work and then the work never happened, what happened there? Was it, or did we run out of time? Did we have broken equipment? What happened? So I think I can appreciate we've got a bigger process going on in the community, but I think we have to look at this isolated incident too and say, what mitigate. I think I'm supporting what comments of and Councillor Colburn saying what immediate mitigating impact can we do if we need to do some work, because it would be an awfully anxious feeling if we consider a private landowner thinking I may be personally vulnerable or liable, and I'm looking out the window looking at a pretty significant rainstorm, and we've had some pretty confounding weather patterns. So I think we owe it to the landowners to do a bit of research on that.
I can give you an example of what happened 3 years ago. After the flooding across the street, township workers arrived with a backhoe and made certain indentations from the road into my front ditch. And they actually cleaned the front ditch out, took all the stone that was there and all the trees that had grown in there, cleaned it out so the water would flow a little quicker, and it made sense at the time, made sure the gradient was correct. The stone's never been replaced, and if you look at it now, the self-planting vegetation there, it's a total eyesore. It's not helping the value of my property at all. And I was under the impression when they did it that, they'd come back and finish it off, but it never was. And I'm not the only one, but.
So great comments, Sarah Gordon, on that. And there's a lot of questions to be answered, and staff does have direction as to where to take this now. So we will proceed with that, and we'll take it from there.
Okay, no more questions?
No. There might be a comment behind you though.
I'm at 460. I've been there since 1988. Was I'm the original owner of our home. Over the 30-some years, I've noticed the ditch has been filling up.
board mentioned that property owners north of us tied into it to drain water, not off their property, but the property behind them, so that they could use that property. I guess the four of us here tonight, if the council isn't gonna, or I'm sorry, if the township doesn't have to clean out our ditch, we may decide to do it on our own. Prior to that, we're gonna have to stop up that ditch that is coming into our property, or into 474's ditch, which is gonna affect the north properties. What legal right do we have to stop up that when they illegally tied into our ditch?
No,
Like,
Greg,
are there gonna be repercussions on 477, 474 for doing that, if it floods out or whatever the house is north of Hill?
I think the best solution right now is we'll let the acting CEO do her part on our end here in the staff side of things, and we're certainly going to work with you here. We're all concerned about the situation too, and we will certainly look into it.
Thank
you. All right, thank you. Thank you for taking your time, fellas. Thanks for stopping in. Perfect. Okay. Correspondence, we have nil. Staff reports, we got 9.1 development and infrastructure. 9.1.1 is DEB 2024-035 Heart Service Preservation Program. The recommendation reads that the council receive staff report DEB 2024-035 entitled Heart Service Preservation Program, and that council grant relief of section 4.1 limits of bylaw 2019-047 purchasing policy to authorize the department head to make purchases of goods and or services exceeding $50,000 and through a request of quotation procurement method, and that council authorize the CAO and treasurer to execute and contract with the lowest quotation received, providing it meets all the respective specifications and all other requisite whatever that word is, of the request of the quotation request. And that council directs staff to proceed with execution of a contract with the lowest quotation received, providing the quotation does not exceed the set limit of $500,000. I need a mover and a seconder. Councilor Thompson, Mayor Carlton, and Kevin, you're going to speak to this.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and to members of council. After hearing the recommendation out loud, it's pretty long-winded, so I'm not going to repeat it. I'll just hop right into it here. So on May 15th, council approved the motion to create a working capital reserve of a program for a hard surface preservation program, and the motion approved was not to exceed a budget of $500,000. Staff took that motion away and considered a few variable technologies and options for a hard surface program. So what I'm presenting to you is single surface treatment. This program will be split into three sections: single surface treatment, and I feel that Center Road from concession 24 to grade 17 is a candidate for a single surface treatment lift, as it's in relatively fair condition. It hasn't completely failed in terms of the asset management terms, but it's going to keep that road a little bit. It's going to bring that road to a better standard than it is right now. Keep the life cycle a little bit longer than expected. So that would be about 4,716 meters of single surface. I don't have the square meter in front of me, but secondly, the second technology considered is crack sealing. So the candidates for crack sealing is English Falls Road. There has been a little bit of settlement that has occurred since the reconstruction of English Falls Road. Unfortunately, it's outside the warranty period. So staff are recommending to crack seal it, and that will keep the water from freezing, thawing, and cracking the asphalt any further and preventing any further damage to that road. Concession 3 Derby from Grade Road 5 to Grade Road 18, and that's in a stretch of about 1,911 meters. And concession 5 Derby from Side Road 3 to Grade Road 16. Again, that's 1,911 meters of crack sealing. I must note that that is the entire length of the road. That doesn't necessarily mean that the whole road is going to be crack sealed. It's just the overall length. And then microsurfacing. Microsurfacing is just using a liquefied emulsified asphalt and applying over a thin layer. It will cover larger cracks, ruttings, and transverse cracking in the asphalt base. So the candidate for that is Forest Hill Heights subdivision, and that will include Forest Hill Drive and Beechwood Drive. And within the attachments, there's attachments to the report attachments. One is the candidate overall map for the single surface. Attachment 2 is the proposed crack sealing roads, and attachment 3 is the microsurface. So in taking consideration of the council's approved motion and developing the program and trying to get it out in a timely fashion in order to proceed with construction, it's recommended that council waives the purchasing bylaw, and that will allow staff to go into a quotation style for procurement. And that if council approves the motion, staff will engage in three larger construction firms that are specialized in the areas of the hard surface preservation. So mainly specialized in single surface and microsurfacing.
Great, thanks, Kevin. Questions from council? Council Grover.
I don't know that it's exactly related to what you're proposing. I don't have any issues with the proposal, but I'm curious about Inglis Falls Road and that's a pretty new road. What went wrong there? And is there something we could have done to identify those issues so that it could have been covered under the warranty period, or did the damage that we're seeing fall after that warranty period ended? I'm just stunned that we're needing to do remedial work on that road already.
I can't speak to the history as to the warranty period. Usually, it is common in new construction that there is settlements that happen within the road base. As terms, within the 2-year warranty period, you usually do a pre-construction and a post-construction. Again, I can't really speak to the past history as to why it wasn't caught at that time, if it was caught, if it did occur in that two-year or after.
Cool. Yep. Any further questions? Council members?
Reading the report, Kevin, through you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, to Kevin there, I mean, I realize that council maybe didn't give direction, and it was probably a very tough thing for you to sit down and put your head around. What do we do? What do we do with $500,000? When you read the report, you realize that $500,000 doesn't go very far. And I think that's important for council to understand that, hey, that's a big dollar, but really for what we have to do and maintain our assets, it's not great. And I think as council, we need to understand that there isn't one contractor going to bid on this. This is 3 separate specialties that you're probably going to have 3 different quotes from. Concern I have, but I don't want to make it a concern because time is ticking. And that my biggest concern is that we're not out yet. What we're going to do is we're going to get I'd be careful the term I use, but the non-competitive people that are able to come and do something because they have a time slot available, right? $500,000 is not big dollars in the road building industry. And for people to mobilize to come in here for a day or two may or may not interest them. So we did limit ourselves for timing. We need to keep moving. I get that 100%. Inglis Falls Road, I don't want to use the word rehabilitation or remedial work. To me, that's maintenance. That was a construction nightmare, building a road on the side of a mountain and doing a retaining wall, hoping everything stayed where it was going to stay. That is what it is. When I read the report, though, and it's not necessarily about this because we got to keep it moving forward, but as council, it's a great report, but you read it and realize that as council, we're struggled to make informed decisions based on this report in front of us. You make reference to a pavement condition index study that was done last year, and you've taken one recommendation out of that. We've never seen that report. We don't know how many other roads were on that report. Is it Center Road the one that was there, or is there 20 other roads that all fit the same criteria? could we as council then say, let's not do one entire road, but we could do 7 different roads to look like we're really doing something? Those are the concerns when I read it. I mean, and it's nothing personal. I realize as council, we said, here's $500,000, do it, you know, come back to us with a report, let's keep it moving. So we as ourselves created a lot of problems. I'm not so sure that crack sealing concession 5 south of Mennonite Corners is in the municipality's best interest, considering what we heard a month ago from the CAO and some conversations that are going on at other levels. So I don't know whether we take some of the crack sealing out, whether we put crack sealing on my recommendation, we put it on a program for next year and do more surface treatment this year to get more of a competitive price, trying to attract those people that say, listen, I'm going to come to Georgian Bluffs, I'm going to maximize the dollar. I'm here for a $250,000 road job. Again, that's big numbers to us. That's not big numbers in the road building industry. Concern I have. Other question I have administratively, maybe through the deputy mayor, chairman to the acting CAO, is it proper to authorize the CAO and clerk to sign an agreement? Shouldn't all agreements be signed by the mayor and the clerk, or sorry, the treasurer? It just seemed odd that we would waive that part of our policy. Like, I think all contracts should be executed by people with the power to bind the corporation. And does the CEO have the power to bind the corporation, or is it still the mayor and the treasurer? Just one of the things that I read in that motion. So there's lots of things going on. I want to keep this program moving. We got to figure out how to give Kevin direction tonight to do that and get the best bang for our dollar. Sorry for the long-winded explanation, but I had to keep reading it, rereading it, and thinking I've learned from it.
I'll answer my part of the question and then I'll likely flip it back to our development services table. The CAO and clerk reference in the motion is referenced to the delegated authority bylaw that's currently in effect. Through that delegated authority, the CAO has the ability to bind the corporation with the clerk.
Thank you for that. Follow up. Clerk Carlton.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I would agree with Councillor Winters on the concession 5 because a week tomorrow is the next Urban Road Exchange meeting, and I think we're going to find out then exactly what the county's doing, and that road is on the table to be uploaded to the county. So that one I would take off was my first thought when I read the report and look at something else. We'll know that for sure in a week's time.
Through the chair to members of council, if I may, perhaps at the time of doing the background information, I consulted with the CAO and we both agreed that perhaps concession 5 from that stretch would be beneficial to have the crack seal if this were not to proceed into Grey County taking it over. My recommendation would be to leave it into the tender as is, and at the time of award, if that road is uploaded to the county, we can have conversations with that contractor at that time to perhaps look at another road. Well, and that's my recommendation.
Kevin, follow up. So where we're at right now then, are we good, or do we want to amend what we have here, or do we want to go with what we got and see where it goes? Obviously with the county, that piece, we're not sure. Council Winters.
The downside with seeing where it goes is you're going to be another 4 to 6 weeks. Right. Surface treatment is something that has to be applied absolutely by the end of September, and you cross your fingers that September is a good month. It relies on temperature and traffic. Without those two things, you're just going to push it in the ditch in the fall. So, you know, we have to make a knee-jerk reaction tonight to keep this ball rolling to get the best bang for the municipality. And is that cross your fingers and hope it works well? Is it regroup and think about it? Is microservicing an option for Forest Heights subdivision? That's something that could be put in a 2025 budget. You do more surface treatment, you keep it as is. Sorry, I don't have a magic wand for you, but those are issues that we face. And I don't want to hear in 6 weeks that, sorry, we missed the window of opportunity. And next year, well, this road. I have done substantial driving through the municipality in the last couple of days after reading the report. And there are roads that aren't going to last. Concession 14, coming off of Clavering, the South Fork. Have a look at that in around where Stonesville Road and Zion Church meet. We have granular A coming up through the top of the surface drain. You know, the kind of, you know, and again, we didn't give direction to staff, but preservation, what can we do today to keep us from spending big dollars in the near future? I'm not sure doing Forest Heights accomplishes what I personally was thinking was going to do it this year. That is something that should be on the agenda, and that's where, had we seen the pavement condition index and the actual formal reports, I feel we could have made more of an informed decision, but time is of the essence. We need to do something tonight to give direction, right?
So for that direction there, does somebody want to make an amendment to the motion that's on the floor, or do we want to proceed with what we got? And I guess my fear is if we decide to make it start changing some things, we may just pull it off the table. That's where we're gonna end up. It's not gonna happen. Girl.
I would suggest proceeding with what we've got on there now. The one variation might be in a week and a half's time, we take a look at concession 5 and pull that off. But proceed with the other ones as they are.
Good comment. If we proceed with what we have now, and we're not even sure we're gonna get anybody to do the job, right? Like we haven't got the tenders out there to see if maybe nobody will bid on it, right? Or want to do it. So there's still that option there too. That's not 100% sure. So, all right, I think I'm clear. We'll move forward with what we have. Any different on that? And then we'll wait for further report to see if anybody tenders on it anyway. So, good. Good discussion. Any further discussion? Any more further discussion? I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? So that is carried. Nope. 9.1.2 DEV 2024-038 Draft Community Improvement Plan and Recommendation. Recommendation reads that council receive report DEV 2024-038 Draft Community Improvement Plan and Recommendations for information, and that council endorses the Community Improvement Plan project completion timeline as presented in the report. Need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Colburn, Councillor Day, and Michael.
Thank you, council, or committee, I should say. Wait, so yeah. I'm pleased to announce that we have an initial draft of our community improvement plan after a good year and a half of some solid work on this. And in interest of time, just wanted to put together a very brief PowerPoint presentation to walk you through the kind of where we've been with the plan, the components of the plan, and our next steps. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to essentially just provide committee of the whole with initial look at the draft plan and to essentially receive the plan and its next steps, work program for information at this point.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. So with that, good. Excellent. So just because I know we also have the public watching, I thought I would take a moment just to explain what a community improvement plan is and what it's all about. Essentially, just to kind of put it in the very basic terms, the municipality cannot give individual properties money just because. There are rules in the Municipal Act that prevent that unless a municipality has a community improvement program in place. And through that structured program, the municipality is allowed to provide financial incentives, grants, loans, and rebates for private sector improvements to properties within the municipality or other such happenings in a municipality. And that's what a community improvement program, community improvement plan is all about. It identifies areas where a municipality wants to enhance and improve the community, whether it's in the business sector or different sector, or even in housing or ecological or energy sectors. It's all that kind of basic plan that allows the municipality to provide that sort of financial incentive to private properties. Slide. Okay. Okay. So in terms of background, in early 2023, we embarked on the first community improvement plan that I'm aware of, at least for the municipality, with the help of JL Richards Consulting. They've actually done a lot of work really spearheading that together for us, which is really fantastic. So I kind of came in midway through 2023, so I wasn't involved in the background review of it, but there was a lot of background review, a lot of public engagement. We created a bit of a steering committee to help with the plan, and that had some of our own council members on it, as well as Mr. Furness from the county's economic development department, and some of the businesses on that. What was really cool in the program, which I thought was really amazing, was how we looked at, we did a survey, and then we really focused on some of the larger business groups in the municipality. We had our small businesses, we focused on the agricultural community, and then we took a step back because we were getting some input from those groups, but we really felt it wasn't enough. So we took a bit of a step back and regrouped as a team, and came up with a larger focus group discussions that involved people from the arts and culture community, not-for-profits came in, and so larger community development groups, as well as the general public. And we got a lot of really good feedback on it. And that occurred, that was more in the last part of 2023 and into the very early bits of 2024. And then, slide please. In April, we met at the museum. We had a bit of a council workshop and a council and committee workshop. And during that workshop, the background report was presented along with the community engagement findings. And then we had some discussion on some of the initial ideas for the CIP and kind of objectives. So with that, staff went away and mostly on the JLR side of things, put together the actual draft document that we have with us today. So the CIP covers a whole bunch of things. And one of the things that we will need to do sometime in the coming months is actually establish the area that the community improvement plan covers. A lot of municipalities have their community improvement plans cover their entire municipality. Some municipalities that I've worked with in the past have actually had several CIP programs within their municipality, and those would be more specific to more of a defined geographic area. Years ago, I worked in the town of Fort Erie, and we had a community improvement plan that just focused on the Peace Bridge area and that little community. And then there was another one that focused on Douglastown, which is another community in the north portion of that municipality. So you can go both ways with community improvement plan. You can have it broadly as a whole municipality at first, and then as your plan evolves, maybe you want to focus on a specific area and then just change your improvement plan focus area. Right now, I think just to start with, at least at the staff level, we're recommending that the community improvement plan be municipal wide so that we benefit the most property owners that we can. So, as we were working through the community improvement plan and with a lot of feedback from yourselves and other community stakeholders, we basically looked at 8 objectives that the plan wanted to focus on. Those objectives help us then to define the incentives that we'll talk about in just a moment. But the 8 objectives really were looking at attainable housing, so increasing our attainable affordable housing stock if we can, help to increase residential intensification. That's looking at bringing in apartments or other secondary units into the municipality. Certainly wanted to really look at rural and agricultural innovation, on-farm diversified uses, that sort of thing. There were some really good examples of how we could help our local entrepreneurs and small business groups. And then, like a lot of municipalities, looking at accessibility and inclusivity in our municipalities is a big thing. And then really looking on kind of maybe a little bit different focus away from residential businesses into our environmental stewardship and our energy efficiencies that we could see happen in municipality, and looking at then kind of rounding it out with more of a traditional CIP look is our property improvement, brownfield redevelopments, and then enhance the townships that's in place. So those objectives were then helped inform the incentive programs. And next slide. We actually, this first initial draft, and I have to stress, this is still a working document. We can certainly change things if we want to. We came up with 15 incentive programs that we're thinking would be available, and they, as you see on the slide, they're under 6 different streams, 7 streams that that the community could look at to provide some incentives. And I won't go through them all, but as you can see, they generally fit the focus areas that we're looking at before in terms of housing, agricultural, business development, certainly our environment, arts and cultures, our building plans, accessibility. That's what I said, tax incentive program to help with an implementation tool for some of those things. We have very recently at staff level, mostly led by our esteemed CAO, looked at additional incentives focusing on ecological sustainability and energy efficiency. And those incentives, that kind of that area, I suppose, that I think about, is something that hasn't really shown up in a lot of community plans in the past. So we might be breaking some new ground if we start to look at those, but I think it's, especially with climate change and everything that we see happening these days, I think it's a good approach to take. So more to come on that. We're still kind of trying to figure out what that looks like at staff level, but we will be bringing that forward to you in the coming months. Slide. So one of the nice things about the plan is that it does take some time to really spell out eligibility requirements and how we apply. Some plans are kind of shy on that, but ours seem to be want to go a little bit extra into that plan, and it's a few pages long, and I don't want to read it all out right now, but essentially the CIP is eligible for anybody who owns property or is a tenant property, provided they get the authorization from the landlord to apply for any of the incentives in the municipality, and also any of the not-for-profit organizations that work or have an interest in the municipality are interested, are eligible, I mean. So essentially, if you were interested in applying for a grant or a loan for any of these incentive programs, there's a bit of a process that kind of looks a little bit like you would see with a development application or a building permit application. You come in, speak to staff with an idea. So you do a bit of pre-consult with staff. We would are working on kind of a bit of an application package that you'd have to put together. That up as the proponent, you would fill out that application. It would go to council or a delegated authority or committee or something like that, and it would be decided upon, and then you would go away and you would do what you wanted to do. And when everything is done, you're able to prove, yes, I did what I wanted to do. I spent money on it. Here's my before and after photos. Here's how you can see what was accomplished. Then once it was accomplished, municipality will then provide you with your grant, your loan to offset the executive. That's generally how it happens. There are some incentive programs that speak to having fees waived and things like that. That would be a little bit different. Once it was approved, we would say, okay, we're going to waive the planning fees, for instance. If you were going for a zoning amendment to do more housing above your business or something like that, you go for a zoning. So we would waive those fees. If you didn't do what you said you were going to do, then you would have to pay after the fact, sort of thing. The last bit is that's a little bit different again, is the tax increment incentives. Essentially, if you were doing some improvements to a property, and once the property is approved, then it would be reassessed, your taxes would go up. So that tax incentive program basically would ladder in your tax increment over a number of years as opposed to getting it right away. That often provides a bit of relief to a small developer or someone who's trying to do something that benefits community, and we're able to work that in. So that's kind of the eligibility and procedures piece. Slide basically is where we're going to go next steps. So, so the draft CIP and the kind of background memorandum that goes with it are included in the report that was included on tonight's agenda. So next steps are basically we're going to probably in July or August now do an open house for the draft CIP. That open house will be just likely here or at the museum. Try to get as many people interested in as we can. We have to circulate the draft CIP to both the county and the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing for their comments. They're both approval bodies for this, so we circulate the draft to them to get comments back. We'll work on some final revisions to the plan probably in August, and then come back. I think in addition, we'll do some presentation tools and that sort of thing in August, and then come back to council in September with a final draft plan. Get your blessings on that. Then we'll work on the statutory public meeting adoption, CIP fall. So hopefully everything goes well and we get, according to Hoyle, we should have a new CIP to start in January.
I think it's interesting and exciting. I think there are lots of benefits that could come from this. I do worry about where we're going to get the money, because I always worry about that. I imagine that what we put into this, if we go the grant route, is going to be have to be heavily informed by our budget procedure. And so I did note that there are some suggestion that we could go with first come, first serve. That's not my preference, but that's just me. I think in terms of fairness and equity, we would not, I would like to see us not offer that as a way of selecting successful applicants, because some people are just better informed and better connected than others. And I think that can give them an unfair advantage. So that's just my input on that. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Day.
Thank you. There's a lot of work happening in the township, and it is exciting to see progress being made on the community improvement plan. Thanks for everything you've done. I was reflecting on CIP objective number 8, to enhance the township sense of place by conserving local heritage, celebrating the local identity, and growing the township's reputation as a destination to live and visit. And I really like this sentiment behind this objective, and by no means want to lose the conserving local heritage. And I wonder if we wanted to add into Objective 8 the concept, just be a little bit more clear if the intent is to add in the concept of diversity or relationship building or reconciliation, to name things instead of guessing at what celebrating the local identity and growing the township's reputation as a place to live and grow could look like.
Great question there, yeah. Michael?
Thank you. That is a good question and good comment. And that's essentially what we were thinking about with that stream, about identifying Georgian Bluffs as a good community where you do want to both live and play, and recognizing that the municipality has a very, very long and diverse heritage with our Indigenous peoples, as well as new incoming new Canadians coming into the area. And that stream, that kind of incentive program is really geared, in my mind anyways, towards all of that. And certainly we can add to that. We can make it a little more robust, a little better defined, to really ensure that we capture those components.
Follow-up question there, Councillor Day?
No, thank you. I appreciate that response.
Carlton.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a comment about the budget amount. So my understanding is we have $100,000 that has come from the county that would be sitting there. Have we defined how we would allocate that per year, or are we looking to add to that? And I can't remember if at the county level we approved continuing that program for another 5 years or not, but it did happen for 5 years, and I'm going to have to check tomorrow on the other site part of it.
I hit the red button first. It's like a game show. You're correct. We do have $100,000 in our budget. That's was provided through a program initiated by Grey County to instigate community improvement. You'll see in the draft plan, there are numbers allocated, financial numbers to the various incentives. One of the things that the consultants are suggesting is that we really, in this first year, monitor the activity that we get through the community improvement plan, like how much intake we get, and also to see where the streams are being, like what incentives are being really targeted. Kind of almost using this first year as a bit of a touch point to see if there are how quickly we've used up those $100,000. If we need to add more money to it on an annual basis, I suspect we probably will. But we don't know what those numbers would look like yet until we start to roll into the program. And maybe we end up changing the focus of the program from 1 year to the next to try to essentially kind of funnel incentives in a certain area that we may want to tackle each year. So kind of a hard way to answer it, but I think right now it's I wouldn't want to see us spend all of that money in the first year. I think it would be good if we spread it out, but realistically, kind of only time will tell at this point.
Follow up? Further questions? I'm not seeing any further questions. I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. All right, corporate services, 9.2.1, COR 2024-022, update township donation policy. Recommendation reads, whereas council passed resolution COW 2022-018 on March 16, 2022, being policy FIN 012022, titled Township Donation Policy, whereas the policy was scheduled for review in March 2024, and whereas during the 2023 and 2024 donation period, council and staff have identified the need for changes to the policy. Now therefore be resolved that council directs staff to update the township donation policy to include modified eligibility criteria for a detailed herein and move the application period to end November 30th of the year preceding fund distribution, and establish a 3 voting member subcommittee consisting of 1 member of council and 2 members of the public, and that staff be directed to present an updated donation policy by approving bylaw for council's consideration at an upcoming council meeting. Need a mover and a seconder. Mr. Thompson, Mr. Colburn, Samantha.
Hello, and thank you. Through your chair, I apologize that this is delayed in getting back to council. It was scheduled for review in March of 2024, so I apologize that it is not coming forward until July. The initial and first policy that was passed by the township was passed in March of 2022 and implemented for the 2023 and 2024 donation periods. During those 2 cycles, we have identified various changes that we would like to make. One of them is around the modified eligibility criteria. So we would be looking to remove the criteria or eligibility that any group or organization that would increase the general's public awareness and of our community in a positive manner. It is extremely vague and hard to evaluate. So with that, we would be eliminating that and adding a requirement that anyone who is making their application under any group or organization that provides a recreational or cultural service that the township currently does not provide, they would need to provide in explaining how they do that the township does not. When we are looking at the application period, currently applications are open beginning mid-July until end of September. This timeline doesn't coincide quite with your budget cycle, that many times you're approving them before you have finalized your budget and knowing what amount you have to approve. And by moving it back a bit, it would allow for the same window period from September to November, then with the committee, assuming you were to go with the subcommittee, reviewing in January. Hopefully by each year by January, with the exception of an election year, you would have seen your budget initially and had an opportunity to change, discuss, and modify any donation amount that you wish for the next year. By moving it back also, it is lessening the window of when an applicant has to hear if they actually were awarded the funds or not, and when they actually receive the funds, because no funds are distributed until after your budget is approved. And then when we are looking at the subcommittee, we have a few options for council's consideration about if you wish to have a subcommittee. You could look at, we are proposing and recommend a 3 voting member, 1 member of council and 2 members of the public, but you could have a 3-member of council voting committee, or you could go 5 with 3 members of council, 2 of the public, or any variation thereof. This subcommittee would be responsible for reviewing all of the applications and making a recommendation to council on awarding. And then, as always, this is your policy that you do have the option to discontinue with the policy completely if you wish. I am happy to answer any questions.
Thanks for that, Samantha. Great report. Questions from council? Over.
I like the changes that have been made, and I support them. I'm a little confused about the qualifying criteria. I see why you left the one out. I was confused by what was meant by that as well. But we have two criteria then for qualification. Is that an and or an or for those 2? And if it's or, the second one, any group or organization, is that to say that if it's a for-profit organization that they qualify for a donation as well?
So through they would qualify to apply. It would be either the committee or council's choice to. The reason that is left there is because not every organization that has historically applied is a registered charity. So we did want to leave capability if they were not a registered charity that they could still make an application.
I gotcha. I think a registered charity can be different from a not-for-profit though, right? You can be not-for-profit and not necessarily a charitable organization. Am I correct? I worry that this leaves us open to giving funds to an organization that's for profit. And in my mind, I can't think of an example where we would want to do that. And I'm not sure if this is clear enough in that regard. Having said that, our former one wasn't clear about it either.
Councillor Thompson.
I think I understand. I think our value is it needs to be a not-for-profit organization. So what if, like a friendly amendment here, or put it out for discussion, if our criteria is a so leave the first bullet as it is, and the third bullet say, I don't know, just include in there any not-for-profit organization that provides a recreation. Like I think we add not-for-profit into both of them. That's my suggestion. I think it's hard to set criteria. I actually thought it was an and situation, but I understand with your explanation, it might be tough to meet the and criteria. But I think, to Councillor Coburn's point, if we have one and it reads as it is now, it opens it up to anything. So a for-profit recreational service could apply in that regard. So as an example, like I'm just picking them out of the air, but like a spring hockey school, a spring hockey team, a pickleball, blah, blah, anybody, it would open it up to almost anybody. So I wonder if we just specify not-for-profit.
So if I may, our deputy CAO just made the comment that part of the reason around the second one is if there was a public or for-profit organization that was holding a community event, that would give them that eligibility if we were not holding it. So the example she used was Cobble Beach. I know we do hold our own Canada Day event, but if Cobble Beach was to hold an event that we were not doing one ourselves, it would be an opportunity for them to apply.
Councillor Winters.
One of those things that you read and read and read, but it still resonates for me from the last conversation we as council had when I don't remember which one of the council members here said at the table, but does it feel right giving out taxpayers' money to public entities and profit groups and things like that? And I still sit there and I look at this and I read it and I think we are overcomplicating the administration of $20,000. And really, I would feel comfortable saying we have a donation policy, but it's an in-kind policy where we donate. Is it a facility rental we waive? Is it equipment? Is it advertisement on our digital boards? I think in today's economic world, the climate that we're in and everybody's position, taking money from somebody to give it back to somebody else to me just doesn't seem right. I think we've overcomplicated this when we start adding a $750 potential expense for having a subcommittee. We're spending far too much time on $20,000. We're spending more time on this than we just spent $500,000 worth of road work. So when you really sit down and you look at the conversations we've had over the last year, I think we're getting out of control with our donation policy. I really do. That's my personal opinion.
Comments? Oh, Councillor Day, there, you even had your hand up for a little bit there.
No problem. It's been a conversation worthy of listening to. I appreciate the work that's gone into this report and feel like the changed timeline is really beneficial should we choose to keep it. I still feel like we might lack clarity when an organization requests something midway through the year, not during the time period where we're accepting applications for donations. And we tend to say yes to those things, to waiving fees for the arena or waiving the tent fee for another not-for-profit organization. So I think I would be interested in seeing some kind of structure around that as well, whether it be setting limits or being stricter and making sure we inform folks who regularly ask for waivals, having fees waived. But for me, that is one aspect that remains unanswered with the donation policy.
Thanks for that. Would you like to comment on that, Samantha? Or?
So through you, council is always eligible to waive any policy they have. Our preference within this policy is that they would apply during the application period, but I don't know that we would have grounds to stop someone because council can waive the policy.
So it was me who made the comment that I don't feel comfortable deciding how to give other people's money away. If it were up to me, we would not have a donation program at all. I don't think it's the role of a municipality to do that. But when I made the statement, there didn't seem to be a whole lot of support for that sentiment resonating in the council chambers. So perhaps that's a discussion for another day, but it's certainly how I feel about donations. I think it's a very personal choice that folks ought to make for themselves and not be made by 7 people sitting around this table. So until we get there, or if perhaps we never will, I guess we'll work with what we've got.
Okay, comments, sir. Mayor Carlton.
Thank you. I landed with Councillor Winters on this one, thinking about why are we in this? And I agree, Councillor Coburn brought it up before. I think when I first got on council, we had a very relaxed donation policy and it covered certain things, those odd items that came in throughout the year, but we didn't really focus on giving this money away. And I kind of turned to Councillor Thompson on this one, that it wasn't as difficult. We could take those requests throughout the year, but we didn't have the large requests coming in that we do now. And it's those larger requests that are making me uncomfortable. The smaller ones asking us to waive a tent fee or a facility rental, those are easier ones that I think we can do. It's the big ones that I'm uncomfortable with. So I would actually lean toward now not having a donation policy.
The comments? Mr. Thompson?
I don't necessarily disagree with any of the comments, and everyone has identified those. I think one thing that we just need to be aware of then is, so what do we do with the Grey County Farm Safeties, the long stay of play, are we just severing those relationships or are we treating them differently? And so I understand what you're saying and I agree with you all. I just think we need to be mindful of thinking about those ones that we commonly subscribe to, or whatever the right word is. I think we've made that commitment to those organizations. So do we sever it or do we call it something else? Would be my only comment.
Mr. Carlton?
So I think those were the ones that I was thinking of, that they were $250 type thing, and they were a way of supporting community and community activities. I don't know how we separate those out from the ones that are asking for $5,000, which I think then we're getting into areas where we shouldn't be.
Council Winters?
Yeah, not to belabor it, but I don't know much about the farm safety grant that we give and things like that. Is that a grant or is it a membership fee that we become a membership to? There could be a difference there, right?
I agree with you. The only reason I bring it up is because those are the things we pushed into that donation envelope. So I just don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because I think there are some valuable valuable endeavors that we do that we call donation that is really a annual kind of an expense. So if we're going to do one thing, we have to be careful with the other. I will say, you're right. I mean, some of these things we can handle one off. The reason we tried to encourage staff to do this was because then we get bogged down in all of those and we're trying to measure. So, I'll pick something it doesn't exist, but like we're weighing a small community athletic team. We don't typically do it. Sometimes we do it. So we're going to say no, we say yes to something else. So it's hard to apply the criteria. So, I mean, I feel for staff a bit because we've asked them to give it some structure, and then we say, well, it's hard to find the structures. And you're right. It's always ironic. We spend hours on $250.
Acting CAO.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And just listening to the conversation that council is having, I could make a suggestion in that I hear what you're saying about the regularly occurring requests, I'll call them, that we see on an annual basis. Smaller things like waiving ice time or, waiving rental facilities, that type of thing. And it strikes me that a lot of these smaller items could be dealt with at a staff level through delegated authority. That way, we as staff know to process those items. You as council don't necessarily need to waive a policy or authorize that waiving. We would, of course, assign metrics to that delegated authority. It would not exceed, for example, $500, but enough to waive ice time where applicable. So something to consider. It may be beneficial to remove those smaller items from a typical donation policy and deal with it through your delegated authority process. Something to consider.
A great comment there. Suggestion, Eric Carlton.
So where would something like that farm safety at $250 fall? Would that become delegated authority?
I would suggest yes. And if this is a path that you would like to go down, then I'm happy to do that with our treasurer and identify those things that we see on an annual basis and assign some metrics around that delegated authority. It would, of course, require an amendment to your policy, therefore would require your authorization prior to it becoming a delegated authority.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, I guess where I kind of go with this too is we are getting bogged down over one of the smallest things we deal with in the township. I think where the biggest heartache for us is when somebody comes in and asks for $5,000 or whatever, it just causes grief for all of us. Probably shouldn't offer anybody $5,000. Right, at the end of the day, we should be cutting that down to, maximum $1,000 or whatever that number might be. But I think that's where we get bogged down is we get this guy request coming in for, $5,000. Well, that really hurts us on 20,000. So again, I'm not in favor, I don't think, of tying up public members and another council member to sit on a committee for another $750 to decide whether we're going to give $250 to the farm safety or not. That really, to me, should be a done deal. That they've been, that's part of who we are, this township. So I don't know where we want to go with this here right now, whether we want to look at turning it down and come back with something else, or what the next step should be. I can see.
And not to precede council's discussion whatsoever, but if you would refer it back to staff, then we could take back some of the commentary we've heard this evening, specifically with reference to the in-kind donation piece that we've heard referenced, and rework the donation policy to marry up with what we think could be a smooth delegation of authority process. But that's simply a suggestion.
Somebody like to amendment on the floor? Carl?
Just exactly what
What
Brittany
she
just said.
just
What she just said, because I'm not going to get all those words.
Yeah, Councilor Winters.
So just one clarifying question. With all of that said, are we looking at getting rid of the cash donations, going to in-kind donations and the delegated authority to deal with the smaller membership, whatever we call that? Is that where we're headed? Okay.
Well, I think I was going to say the same. I think we should come back with a list of, out of our donations, what are our memberships? And then moving towards delegated in-kind type things. And I also, since I've got the thing on here, I also want to say, I really appreciate you coming forward with the report. And I don't think this is about your report. This is about us, I think, struggling our way through, you know, what we want, what we intend to do, and then what the impact is if we go ahead with it. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Councilor Winters.
And if I can echo that as well, I mean, that was the same sentiment when I brought up earlier tonight. We give staff here, this is easy, run with it. And it's like, oh, wait a minute, we as council need to get more direction and be a little more clear. So again, I'm with Councillor Thompson. I appreciate what you've done. You've opened the dialogue, and I'm hoping we give you enough direction tonight when we leave here that it makes things easier.
I was just going to add an apology for putting them to all this work only to change your minds.
All right, so I believe we have an amendment.
Just gonna say thank you for the apologies, but I take no concerns with it. It's perfectly fine.
All right, so we do have an amendment on the floor here to this. I do believe Mayor Carlton is the mover. I need a seconder. Councillor Winters, any conversation, discussion? Call the vote. All those in favor? That is carried. And back to the amended main motion. We already have a mover and a seconder.
I'm just going to stop you for 1 minute on behalf of the clerk. The referral is enough. So yeah, it's not an amendment. You don't need to vote on the main motion. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm just going to call the vote into the original motion.
No.
We're done. Okay, moving on. Okay, 9.2.2 COR 2024-024. The municipal funding agreement, Canada Community Building Fund. Recommendation reads that the bylaw be passed to authorize the municipal funding agreement on the Canada Community Building Fund on Association of Municipalities of Ontario. Need a mover and a seconder. Mayor Carlton. Councillor Day. Samantha.
Yes, those through you. This is the updated agreement for your what was formerly called your federal gas tax fund. It has been since renamed to the Canada Community Building Fund. This is the former agreement expired March 31st of 2024. So this agreement would be setting a new 10-year term to expire March 31st, 2034, with you having to have all funds spent by December 31st of 2038. The CCBF fund does contribute a large financial amount to your budget each year, being 2024's was slightly under $350,000. And during the 10-year period that this agreement would cover, we are anticipating almost $1.8 million of proceeds. So I do strongly encourage you to agree to this agreement.
Thank you, Samantha. Discussion from council? Yeah. All right. I don't see any discussion on it. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? That is carried. Unfinished business is nil. New business is nil. Notice of motion. Does any member wish to provide a notice of motion? See none. Closed session is nil. Date of our next regular meeting is July the 17th at 5 p.m. Committee of the whole then will be September the 4th, 2024 at 5 p.m. If there is no further business, I'll now call for an adjournment. Need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Thompson. Councillor Coburn. Discussion. All the vote. All in favor? That is carried. We are adjourned. Thank you.